Welcome to North Carolina History. Today we are going to take a trip to North Carolina's coast and visit some historic sites. Our first stop is at the Wright Brothers Memorial, and the Wright Brothers Memorial is in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, and the Wright Brothers are the individuals that invented and flew the first airplane at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina in the year 1903. Okay, this next stop that we're taking is at Jockey Ridge State Park. And Jockey's Ridge is located also on the coast of North Carolina, particularly at Nags Head, and it's the largest natural sand dune on the east coast. Now we will enter Fort Raleigh. Fort Raleigh National Historic Site protects and preserves known portions of England's first New World settlements from 1584 to 1590. This site also preserves the cultural heritage of the Native Americans, European Americans, and African Americans who have lived on Roanoke Island. Now, while we're at Fort Raleigh, we will also look into the Lost Colony. And the Lost Colony is about how the first English settlement was established in the year 1587. And it's also about the first English-born child, Virginia Dare. And a little information about that. When John White went back to England to get supplies, he was not able to return until 1590. And when he returned, the colony had vanished, hence the Lost Colony. And the only clue that had been found was the word Croatoan carved on a tree. Today, a Pulitzer Prize author, Paul Green, has written an outdoor drama and reenactment of the Lost Colony. And what's interesting is that the outdoor drama is performed close to the original location of where the settlers lived.
As the last major European power to claim land in the New World, England sent an exploratory expedition led by Sir Walter Raleigh in 1584. Raleigh returned to England with good reports, and by the middle of the following year, England was ready to make its first attempt at colonization.
Queen Elizabeth sent a fleet of 7 ships containing 500 men to set up a colony in present-day North Carolina. After a long journey across the Atlantic Ocean, the men arrived at a small island off the coast of North Carolina and named it Roanoke.
The settlers found life in the New World harder than expected. They depended on the local Indian tribe to supply them with food because they were not able to provide enough for themselves. The Indians soon tired of feeding the colonists, so the colonists had to steal food in order to survive. They barely made it through the first winter and jumped at the first opportunity to sail back to England.
About a year later, in 1587, England tried once more to create a permanent settlement. The Queen appointed John White as governor of the new colony, and they set out with 3 ships in May. The plan had been to colonize a little farther north than the previous attempt, but because of a series of obstacles and being sabotaged by their own pilot, the ships were forced to, once again, settle at Roanoke. The settlers again quickly found out that life in the New World was not all it was cracked up to be. They were running low on almost everything they needed and urged John White to return to England for supplies. John White left, but was unable to return for 3 years.
When he arrived back at the island, he found that the entire settlement had been disbanded and there was no one in sight. The only clue to where the colonists had gone was the word Croatoan, which happened to be the name of a nearby Indian tribe and island. Because of bad weather, John White was forced to sail back to England without being able to look for his family.
This sequence of events has baffled scholars for centuries. Roanoke is now known as the Lost Colony. The disappearance of the settlers remains one of the most mysterious happenings in our nation's history.
We started our journey at Fort Raleigh, built by the English in 1585. This fort is very different than those of the Spanish and French. Fort Raleigh is an earthen fort, meaning it's made entirely of dirt. It's also much smaller, measuring only 50 square feet. As you can tell, compared to us, the height of the fort is much smaller than the others we've seen.
The English built the fort for protection. They wanted to be able to defend their colony from the Spanish as well as the native Indian tribes. Fort Raleigh is the only structure in the Roanoke area that we know is in the exact place that the English constructed it over 400 years ago. Evidence found from archaeological digs helps scholars reconstruct the fort as accurately as possible.
After exploring the fort, we took a tour of a recreated settlement. This small settlement, set up by reenactors, showed us what life would have been like in Roanoke. There were different craftsmen who were demonstrating skills that would have been needed to successfully create a colony.
We watched a man chopping wood. We weren't sure what he was doing at first, but we later found out he was making beams for houses. He told us that if he worked on nothing but making beams all day, he would be able to get about 2 beams made. There was also a blacksmith who repaired tools that they had brought over from England.
We had a chance to try out some of the tools and some of the jobs that the colonists would have done. We found out really quick how hard it was to be part of a successful colony. Not only did they have to work hard, but at the end of the day they didn't have much to go home to. Their living spaces were cramped and uncomfortable.
We tried hard to solve the mystery of the Roanoke colony, but we, like the hundreds of scholars before us, were unable to find the true answer to what happened to the lost colony.
After stopping at Fort Raleigh and visiting and learning about the lost colony, we will also take a trip and visit each of North Carolina's 7 lighthouses. The first lighthouse that we will visit is the Bald Head Island Lighthouse, and it was completed in 1817. The Ocracoke Lighthouse is the next lighthouse we will visit, and it was built in 1823. The third lighthouse to be constructed in North Carolina was the Cape Lookout Lighthouse, and it was built in 1859. The Cape Hatteras Lighthouse was built in 1870. The Bodie Island Lighthouse was built after the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse in the year 1872. The Currituck Beach Lighthouse was completed in 1875 and is known for the wild ponies that roam the Corolla beaches. The most recently developed lighthouse is at Oak Island, and it was completed in 1958. As you can see, we have some fun things to learn this year in class. I hope you are excited and ready to learn.